Hello and welcome to our third video on the Samson Historical YouTube channel. Thank you so much for joining me in our study this afternoon. I'm Abby Samson, I'll be your host, and you can find me here every Wednesday at 4 p.m. and where we can talk about all manner of 18th century life, material culture, and happenings. And so if you've been here with us the whole time, thank you. If you're just joining us, we appreciate you and we hope that you enjoy. If you're joining us from the Ohio territory, we will actually be your way for the fair at New Boston this weekend. So please come up, see us, say hi, give us a shout out. Let us know in the comments if you'll be there so we can expect to see you. But it's our favorite time of year. We get to get out and really talk and see people at all these different reenactments and events. And so first one, fair at New Boston this weekend. Really hope to see you there and get to talk with you. Today, we are going to be talking about an item that I personally feel should be much more common in our kitchens today, and I feel like you're probably going to agree. So a little bit about me. I am a wife, I'm a mother, and so I spend a lot of time cooking, which I actually really enjoy doing. Sometimes it's better than others, I'll give you that, but I really enjoy cooking, and utilizing these 18th century items in my personal kitchen, it's kind of funny because it's something that happens very naturally, and some of these items just make sense. So you may never have heard the word porringer before, or you may have, and there are a lot of different variations of a porringer, but to kind of get us off on the right foot and make sure we're all kind of on even ground here with our understanding, I'm actually going to use a quote from 1688, which is a little bit before our typical time period, I know, but this is an item that had a long history. And we're going to really talk about it in the 18th century, but I think that this specific quote really makes sense for understanding the whole field of what we're talking about. So it's by Randall Holmes, and it says, "There is a half-round vessel and in the belly without a brim. Some have 2 ears, but mostly only 1, or a handle, or a stook, as the country term is, by which it is carried from place to place. It hath its name from it bearing or holding of pottage, a porringer being of much use for that liquid or broth." So a porringer actually has medieval roots, and it's one of those words that gets spelled phonetically a lot of different ways. And before it was porringer, it was actually pottager or pottinger, sometimes spelled with a Y, sometimes E's. And so that gets really confusing, and the best way to kind of figure out when it's spelled when would be in dictionaries. And so you have pottager, which is more common really in that 17th century aspect. And then that's all referring to the small dish to hold pottage. And if you can kind of see in front of me, I have an array of porringers that we're going to look at a little bit more closely, and it's really going to start to make sense. But eventually it does become porringer, and that's spelled a couple of different ways. Porringer, P-O-R, or P-O-R-R-E-G-E-R, and then P-O-R-R-Y-N-G-E-R, but we go with P-O-R-I-N-G-E-R. So it's a lot of phonetics there. But for a hard and fast rule, a kind of a fun fact, in 1724, we have a dictionary definition of porringer, but not pottinger. So for our purposes here, porringer is the solid term. And we can date it back earlier than that, but that's where we really see that they don't overlap anymore. So we're going with porringer. And the same dictionary actually defines porridge and pottage as foods separately. So the first one, a porridge, is a food or a liquid food of herbs, flesh, etc., or a pottage, which is the broth of meats, etc., boiled. And I'm going to be honest with you, I don't know that I know the difference. So if you have an opinion, please comment and let me know. I feel like this is kind of like the soup stew conversation. Everybody has their own opinion. Also, if you have recipes, would love to see those as well. So yes, there is pottage and porridge, which are evidently different, but definitely want to know your thoughts on that. I feel like we could have a great debate. But either way, it always makes me think of the old Mother Goose rhyme, the peas porridge hot, peas porridge cold, peas porridge in the pot 9 days old, which I guess is appropriate because it does date back to about 1760 in the earliest written record we can find. So I'm gonna allow it. It makes sense, right? And so when we look at these items, again, they date back much, much further. The first account is actually in 1522, in the first English account, rather. And so we have these items that are changing in name, but not really changing in style. Especially throughout, as we again, in 1630s and 40s, when they're coming over into the colonies, really with the first kind of English settlements happening here. So they're coming with people immediately, because people of all social classes have different types of these. And so they do fall out of fashion in the early 1800s. So that's where we kind of lose them in history. They've morphed into other things at this point. But they do stay common in New England for a good while. And actually, a really interesting fact, if you've watched our videos before, you know that my daughter Peyton, or History Peyton, as she likes to call herself, she's 6. She loves George Washington. Huge fan. And so Martha Custis Washington, his wife, her first father-in-law, actually noted in his will specifically certain things to give to his wife when he passed. And one of them was a silver porringer, but that was also listed next to 3 feather beds, a dozen silver spoons, and a sealskin chest. So it had value, which I think is important to note, that this ornate silver porringer held enough value to be specifically listed as to whom it was going to, along with these clearly big ticket items. I don't know the going rate for a sealskin chest, but I assume it's significant. So, and we find that a lot in wills and registries. And when somebody passes, you have this inventory, even here in colonial America, especially pre-revolution, you have this inventory of things that are theirs when they pass. And we see porringers on a lot of those registries as well. In different archaeological digs, one person found a record, and I'm sorry that I don't have that specific note in front of me, where they found a dozen in a country home of simple porringers. So they're really a very common item, a common person item. So if you're wanting something that really makes you feel connected to your heritage and your history, and I jokingly told a friend, I made a shepherd's pie last week, and I said, the ancestors are happy. And so it's kind of one of those things that really makes you feel connected with that heritage. But regardless, they are used for a ton of different things. So why are these things popular? Why is this funny little bowl with a handle? Why? And the first answer, there's a couple different answers we'll go over, is convenience. So like I've said a couple times, I'm a mom, and sometimes, especially when we're all out and about, that means eating on the go. And now luckily she's old enough to feed herself. When she was little, is feeding this little person while we're on the go, and we're trying to run the store at events and still corral this small child. And so the porringer actually comes in handy there, and it's used to feed children and elderly people, historically invalids, people who can't feed themselves. And so there's actually this cute little section of a much longer poem by William Wordsworth, and it's not an entirely happy poem, I will warn you now, but we're going to look at a very small snippet of it. And so in 1798, you have this little lyric, and it says, "From we are 7," and it tells the story of a little girl with 6 siblings. And it says, "And oft after sunset, sir, when it is light and fair, I take my little porringer and eat my supper there." And she's talking about going to eat in her doorway. The painting that's up on your screen now, that is actually by Jean-Baptiste Grousset. And I think it's great because if you look at the little boy and that has the drum on the back of his chair, there's a little porringer where this clearly very busy, very tired, and slightly annoyed mom is trying to feed this child. But even in this house, it's a common house. You have this little porringer that she's feeding her baby out of. And so again, that I love when when my daughter was little and I would feed her, and I can feel what these moms in these paintings are feeling. Like that hasn't changed. I don't know if you have children, but that feeling is very real. And so being able to use that item in the same way they did was really cool. But another thing that it's used for is measuring, which I know seems very odd and counterintuitive because you have this and you have this, and these are both porringers. And you also have this, which is a porringer. And so, but especially in English recipes where you have the worshipful company of pewters who are making pewter porringers, and you have silver porringers, they're actually being made with a set of measurement standards. So you can have, a recipe, one that calls for a half porringer of oats is one that we saw when we were doing research for this specific item. And really, if you're going from, this to this, are they slightly different sizes? Yes. But is this going to mess up whatever you're putting half of one of these in oats in? Probably not. So, you have a frame of reference for that. There is some of that there. Also, another way is, again, those ledgers of items. You have different measurements being kind of denoted for the things that are in this person's inventory. One, again, being a porringer that, is I'm sorry, I lost my note here, but it's essentially called for a porringer of beer, or a pint of beer size porringer is what it said. And so, that's a large porringer. But it's giving sizes to say that these were the sizes available. There's also a recipe from 1740 that calls for a porringer of good ale yeast. So again, you're using it for a lot of different things. And I think one of the most interesting and kind of funny things would be a drinking game that we found when we were researching for this that specifically involves a porringer that was written about in a letter. And we're going to pull up this here from the Tattler, which was essentially a magazine. And I'm going to read this because I know it can be a little fuzzy. It says, "We got into a dark corner with a porringer of brandy and threw raisins into it, then set it on fire. My chamber fellow and I diverted ourselves with the sport of venturing our fingers for the raisins. And the wantonness of the thing was to see each other look like a demon as we burnt ourselves and snatched out the fruit. This fantastical mirth was called Snapdragon." And I do have kind of an inkling that we're going to see Snapdragon played at some events after hours now. Maybe not in our camp, but if you play in your camp, I'd love to watch. 'Cause that sounds like it was quite the game and quite the laugh. Maybe a little dangerous. But again, so it's used on all these different aspects of life and society and different things. It's just a thing to have. They had a porringer, they had a bowl. I'm fairly certain that the people who wrote this would have used just about any wide-mouthed vessel to make their game work, but luckily for us, it was a porringer. So, what are these made of? And they actually did make bleeding bowls. You'll hear that too. Bleeding bowl porringers, and those are often made of pewter or silver as well, and they have striations on the inside. So you don't have to worry if your porringer was a bleeding bowl before you, use it. Those would have been made with graduated levels to show how much they were bleeding a person. So that goes into, I think, the 1850s or 60s, I found. And it may go on further, where they're being used as bleeding bowls in that style, but they've fallen out of fashion in the kitchen. So what are they made of? Well, we've mentioned pewter a few times. We've mentioned silver a few times. There's also ceramic in China, and then you have earthenware and some stoneware porringers. So they're being made out of just about everything, which makes sense because if something denotes, that it can go through all of these different social classes, they're all going to want their different levels of kind of value. I don't think Mr. Custis was willing, an earthenware porringer to his wife. No, he's willing a silver porringer to his wife on his death because the value is different. So, again, most of them are molded silver or pewter. That's definitely the most common. And we're going to talk a little bit about how those are made, because you're going to see some examples, like I said, I have here. And the bowls are cast, and the handles are cast. And so the bowl is actually cast first into a mold, and then you can see it kind of better on this one here, and we'll pull it up on your screen. You can see lathe marks on the inside, hopefully. It's got some very fine striations in here. So it was put on, it was poured into, the piece here was taken out, and then a lathe was used to clear out this area here. And so after the bowl is cast, you have to be able to attach the handle. And so this is actually a separate mold that's then held up to the piece here, poured into, so it'd actually be up and down, but it'd be poured into. And the really cool thing is you can tell a lot of original porringers because of this specific mark here that I have in this one. So this is called, and I don't know if you can see it, but it's right here, a linen mark. And that linen mark is where they actually held the bowl with tongs wrapped in linen. So they'd expand in here like this. And that linen acted as a dam. So it kept this molten metal, which melts at the same temperature that this metal melts at, from running through and ruining the whole piece. So you have this linen mark because it's stopping where they've adhered the handle. And so with pewter ones especially, pewter cools incredibly quickly when you're casting. If you've never cast pewter, it's actually really fun. We have some original spoon molds that I like to mess around with. But pewter cools really quickly, and especially towards the end if you have an open air mold like that, where the ends of it may not fit super snugly up to your piece. And so you get ones like this, and I'll put this up specifically on the screen because it's going to be something that you'll see a lot in original pewter molds. And I don't know if you can see it, but you can see a little bit here that the ends are not, these kind of very far tips of the wing, are actually not kind of melted to the bowl, but the center is. That's really common, that the pewter cooled just a little bit too much, in pewter porringers specifically. So in New England, you have a lot of, again, the pewter porringers, and you have this style here, which has one handle. That's what we see in colonial America. I'm not saying that double handles didn't happen, but being produced, you really only have, except for maybe a very few, I definitely never want to say never, because as soon as I do, one of you will find research that says that, oh, look, I found this double handle that was produced here. And if you do, great, always tell me. Definitely enjoy that, because why do we do this except for to learn? But the research right now says that we only really have single handle styles, and that stays. And so this one actually did have this top here, but it broke a long time ago before I had it. So that's really popular again in the New England area. There's actually specific styles to specific regions rather, and New York has its own very specific style. It has almost like a fishtail into it, and unfortunately I don't have one here. This is an English porringer, and you can see it has two handles. Those are added towards the later part of the 18th century. Not a popular style here, but you can see it's got these beautiful handles, this beautiful inlay in the bowl, and that same thing is done here. Now, unfortunately, none of these have maker's marks on them, so our kind of dates on these are an estimate at best. But we can tell from the style kind of the provenance of those. So I don't own a silver porringer, unfortunately. One day, maybe I will, if you guys can let Casey know that would be a great anniversary gift. But we have the silver ones. Or I'm sorry, we have the pewter and the redware. I will say it's kind of an interesting tidbit that I found and was believable but still shocking. So Paul Revere, obviously, well-known silversmith. Many of you probably know that already. He did a lot of different things, including dentistry, which is a whole nother video. But he was a very popular silversmith. His father was a very well-known and renowned silversmith, and he made porringers. Recently at auction, I say recently, it was actually in 2020, so just a couple years ago, one of the original Paul Revere porringers actually sold for $52,500. So that may be why I don't own one, actually. It's all coming full circle now. But his records state that he made 30 porringers between 1761 and 1797. That his shop did. Whether he personally made them or not, the shop produced 30-ish silver porringers in varying degrees. Just an interesting fact there. And a lot of stuff is known about the pewter, but what I want to talk about is the redware. And I think it has maybe the more interesting story, to be honest with you. So these are both redware porringers. These are actually reproductions, and they're wonderful, wonderful reproductions by Amanda Lips. And we actually sell these in our store on our website, so you can definitely check those out there. But the more important thing about these is that these are based almost exactly off of a style that was being made in Yorktown. So it doesn't get more American. It doesn't get more, documentable to this area than that we have these records of the factory where they were being produced. So I'm going to refer to my notes to this because I don't want to get it wrong, because it is very important. But we have mention of the poor potter of Yorktown. And that first mention is by William Gooch, who at the time was the governor of the Virginia territory. So again, at this time, he's still reporting, and he's appointed by England and to run, again, this area. And so and it was in 1739, he mentions the poor potter, and he's actually referencing the death of the poor potter. But we know now, even though he never mentions him by name, that he was talking about William Rogers. And William Rogers was kind of a potter, but he was definitely not poor. He was a very well-off businessman. He was an entrepreneur. He bought 2 large lots in Yorktown and turned them into a massive functioning commercial pottery area. And so he had multiple kilns that he was running and employing people. And this was a huge operation, probably one of the most successful in that colonial era. But the reason that he's calling him the poor potter, just kind of, there's a reason that we don't find certain records, right? And one thing that William Gooch is doing is that he actually really was sympathetic to people producing things kind of on the home front. So people producing things here in the colonies. But he had to report to a board that was managing the incoming and outgoing and the productivity of the colonies. And so he's downplaying this because you're only allowed to produce certain amounts. You're only allowed to produce certain things. And you can get hit with some fines and different other implementations of these kind of statutes and rules that are being created. So the poor potter was by no means poor. He was mass producing these. And this business operated until 1745. So he died in 39. His business continued with his relatives until 1745. And these are based off of, you can find them at the Chipstone Foundation, actually, on their website and their database. And it was really, really exciting to really get to look at them. But you can find where the molds that some of these were sitting on, where he was making the same exact thing over and over again. And I think that that's awesome. So here's an image from that article from the Chipstone Foundation. I'll make sure to get the link for you guys. And if you look in the bottom left, you can actually see a pipkin. So it's got that handle there. You can see the porringer in the middle at that. So you got 2 large plates, and then that porringer is in the middle. There's different things in that glaze that are not necessarily food safe, that make it just a little bit darker. You have a little bit more green in it and kind of streaks. And those are eliminated for your safety and ours. And so this potter actually also made the earliest stoneware butter churn that's been found and produced and mass produced in colonial America. That's also in that article. So again, just a really, really cool article. And I've gone off on a tangent, so I apologize. This is always really exciting for me. If you watch the pipes video, I get really into common things. This is a different porringer style that was made also next to a cup. And those cups are really interesting. We'll do another video on those sometime, but that's something I'd definitely like to see more of. But there's, again, all different kinds of porringers, and they're being made out of redware mostly. Some are being made out of stoneware, but it's not near as common. And even more common is the silver, or I'm sorry, silver, but the pewter. And so you have these earthenware porringers, and then later they're being made in a different production factory in Salem, North Carolina, and that runs from 1780 to 1800. That era. You have these stoneware porringers that are being made then, and redware. So a lot of these production pottery kilns essentially were making different levels and different materials into these items because they're wholesaling, they're selling to different stores and such. But these are by far, I think, some of the neatest items. They're some of the best that can be used just in your kitchen average today. I love the redware porringer because I love the handle, which may seem weird, but especially when I was, again, feeding a kid, running around doing different things, you put your finger through the handle, you've got, good motion, and it's really nice for like whisking eggs in the morning. But you have all of these, again, all these different items that you can use today and feel that same connection with your history that I feel, which is great. And I sincerely appreciate you guys being here. I do want to end with a really cool image, and it's called Pretty Sally, and there is a poem underneath it. I definitely suggest you look it up because I am not reading this whole poem, because what it is a love poem to the girl at this restaurant, at this tavern. But the important part is, in her hand she's holding a porringer. So we have I honestly, it's a cool image. It's from here in colonial America, which is great. And here it is. Again, you see in her hand on a plate, she has a large porringer with a spoon. And a lot of things going on. But again, I urge you to read this and look this up. Again, this is Pretty Sally. And at one point, he compares her to a lot of different foods in her loveliness. So I don't know that I'd use these as any pickup lines for you. And, don't forget, if you like this content, if you like what we're doing, if you love history like we do, make sure that you subscribe and like the videos and let us know what you think. I love seeing comments from you guys. So all these videos can be shared on social media, and I will try to include links to things like Pretty Sally here. Again, if you are going to be in the Ohio area, we are going to be in Springfield. That would be this weekend at the fair at New Boston. We are so excited to be with you guys. Come see us in person. Let us know. Say hi. Again, you can find these at our website if you are interested in the redware porringers specifically. And then we have actually here our event in Lebanon, Indiana. So if you're near us, September 18th, the weekend of September 18th, come see us at Colonial Market Days. So we have a lot of fun there. It is a F&I and RevWar event. Come out, come see us. Check out colonialmarketdays.com for registration for that. We're really happy to be a part of that event in our hometown. But we're getting ready to hit all these different fall events, and I look forward so much to seeing you all in person. Thank you for being here with us. We will see you next Wednesday, if not before, at the fair. We'll see you next Wednesday at 4 p.m. Thank you so much. It's been my pleasure.